It's another Saturday, another brisk, cold day, windy day here in Spokane, Washington. I hope that you're staying warm and cozy and comfortable and everything's going fine wherever you are. And now I just invite you to put on the brakes, grab a cup of coffee. I almost couldn't say that right. I might need some coffee. Put on the brakes, grab a cup of coffee, and join the conversation because it is time once again for Coffee Breaks with Steve. I definitely needed that, obviously, because the mouth isn't quite warmed up yet this morning. Good morning to all of you. Welcome to Coffee Breaks with Steve on this Saturday, January 28th. Once again, it's hard to believe how quickly the months go by and even ultimately the years. I mean, we're basically through the first month of 2023. If you are tuning in live, welcome. And I just invite you to say hello in the chat here so we know that you're here. Just also invite you as we get into our topic today to make sure that you're part of the conversation. That's what this is about. We're all sitting around our virtual coffee table this morning. What are you drinking this morning? Are you having your coffee? Are you having your tea? Are you having your whatever it might be? Let us know what you're consuming there and what the weather's like. Boy, a bunch of people tuned in already, so I guess I better say my hellos here. I see that Corey Ann is here. I see Jerry Zetterval, Scott Glavin, Rick Venturi, Kathy Garlick, Jay Zetterval, Kathy Glavin. Hi, Kathy. Emily Snow, you are here. I know that you weren't sure if you were going to be able to make it live, but welcome, Emily. Hi, Fabiola. Good to see you. And I think I saw a couple of other people out there who are watching and didn't necessarily say hi in the chat. Do so if you feel comfortable doing that. If you are tuning in later and watching this as a recorded program, you can still take part in the chat. If you're on Facebook, you should still be able to make comments in the chat along the way as you're watching this and be part of the conversation as well. So I invite you to do that and welcome you just as much. And just a reminder that Coffee Breaks with Steve, in addition to being on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, it's available recorded on both of those platforms and will be also available probably by tomorrow at the latest on our podcast sites on Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcasts. So you can also go out and catch it there or refer your friends there. Okay, what's going on this week? It's an interesting week as we get from January into February, and let's see if I can hit the right buttons this morning. That's the other thing that has to happen. We have some special days this week, January 28th to February 3rd. Today is Data Privacy Day. Several months ago, we had Chris on here to talk about cybersecurity, but data privacy goes really beyond that. Think about not only your password safety, but keeping your credit card information and other things secure when you're online. So this is a day that they encourage that you kind of take the day, maybe because it's a Saturday, it's a good day to do it, but it's January 28th every year, to go through and just kind of check all of your sites and all of your data security and make sure, kind of double check everything. Not a bad idea to run a credit report and do all of those things. So that apparently is what today's about. It's also, I should have grabbed a kazoo for this. It's National Kazoo Day. Any of you ever play a kazoo? And be honest, how many of you would honestly say that you own a kazoo right now? Some of you actually do. I know that for a fact. But I remember creating kazoo bands when we were kids, and you could even create them. You could make a makeshift kazoo with a piece of wax paper and a hair comb, and you vibrate against it and it would make that buzzy sound. So today is national, because I love when they say national, and you know for a fact that it wasn't because Congress passed a bill or the president made a proclamation. It's just a national day. Tomorrow is National Puzzle Day. Are you a puzzle person? And if so, what kind of puzzles? They're jigsaw puzzles, crossword puzzles. People like Sudoku. They like jumbles. I'm into different kinds of puzzles, and I like to do puzzles that are kind of mind bending, kind of try to keep my brain alive and keep me young. We, during the holidays particularly, we will pull out the jigsaw puzzles and have a table set up with those. I don't see Shalane on here. Oh, she is on here. Sorry. Hello, Shalane. And is there anybody else I haven't said hi to? Trying to keep track of everybody. But yeah, National Puzzle Day. So what kind of puzzles do you and your family like to put together? What is your puzzle preference? And I guess National Puzzle Day isn't necessarily the only day of the year to do a puzzle, but it may be a good time to go back, and I've got to go through a box every now and then and even see. We've got jigsaw puzzles I don't think we've ever taken out of the box. It's time to start setting those up. The last Monday in January, so on this coming Monday, the 30th, is Bubble Wrap Appreciation Day. Okay, come on. We all know bubble wrap in and of itself is therapeutic. We all love bubble wrap. We all love to be able to pop those bubbles. And you can even get apps on your phone so that you can virtually pop bubbles. I'm not sure. I guess it kind of fills that void, right? But there's something about actually physically having those bubbles between your thumb and your finger and popping them that feels good for some reason. But it's not always on a specific date. It is always the last Monday in January. So I expect to hear a lot of bubbles popping on Monday, because that's apparently the day to do it. January 31st is National Backward Day. And you'll see, I know a lot of the schools will commemorate that by having the kids, encouraging kids to come wearing like their shirts backwards, and you can do different things to commemorate Backward Day. Some people like to play music backward. It drives me nuts a little bit to do that. Coming from a musical background, kind of throws me a little bit to hear music backwards. But that's the 31st is National Backward Day. Celebrate that. There are probably a lot of jokes here too, but just celebrate that however you feel so inclined. We could all use this one, no matter where you are, no matter what your leanings are. I think we could all agree that it's not a bad idea to have a no politics day. February 1st is no politics day. It's a day to ignore all of the political opinions, all of the political pundits, all of the stuff that's on the news, which probably means not turning on the news at all, but celebrate no politics day on the February 1st, which is Wednesday, right? Wow, Wednesday already, we're going to be into the next month. Hey, one of my favorite holidays, I think I've talked about this before, going back to my high school days, we all of my gang of friends, some of you on here were at least on the fringes of that gang, because there are people on here that I've known since high school. And but my friends and I would come up with excuses to have a little get together, and we weren't big partiers. We didn't sneak alcohol and that kind of stuff. It was just get together with some soda pop and some potato chips and dips, and maybe play some games or put together some puzzles. But we each picked a pseudo holiday that would be our responsibility to set up and host and do everything. And I chose Groundhog Day. I just thought it was one, at the time, there was no Groundhog Day movie. That was not one that was a big deal. You'd see something on the news about the groundhog seeing a shadow or not seeing a shadow, but it wasn't a huge deal. And so for me, it was just a way to pick something that would otherwise have been somewhat obscure to come up with a reason to get together and have a party. Over the years, it kind of became this thing where my friends would reach out to me even well after high school. I'd get cards in the mail. I would get phone calls. One year, a friend of mine even sent me a telegram back when those were still something that you would get physically. I actually had a telegram delivered to my door wishing me a happy Groundhog Day. My family would contact me. And to this day, it's not unlikely that on Groundhog Day, on Thursday, I'll get a variety of private messages on Facebook, maybe even just Facebook comments. I'll probably get some text messages. I may get some phone calls. People to this day still help me celebrate Groundhog Day, and that's coming up this week. We know the real serious purpose for Groundhog Day is to find out if we're going to have 6 more weeks of winter or not, because the groundhog obviously is able to predict that. We don't have groundhogs here. The groundhogs are more prevalent, the actual groundhog, in the south and in the eastern part of the United States. But we do have marmots here, which are cousins, direct cousins of the groundhog. And they look a lot like groundhogs. And I get a kick out of seeing the marmots in our area, although a lot of people see them as pests. We have some birthdays coming up this week that I want to also recognize and celebrate. Carol and John Siegel, friends, were on Coffee Breaks with Steve a few months ago talking about life in New York. And we actually got to spend some time with Carol and John when we were in New York before in November. It was a couple of months ago. Hang on. One of those mornings. And we'll talk about it a little bit later, but Jonathan Siegel, I shouldn't say John. He doesn't go by John. Jonathan Siegel is going to be back on Coffee Breaks with Steve very soon to talk about a project he's been working on. But it's Carol Siegel's birthday on the 30th, so happy birthday, Carol. Derek Nelson, musician, music educator, also has been a guest on Coffee Breaks with Steve, friend of Coffee Breaks with Steve. Derek will also be back to see us here in a few weeks. But Derek is celebrating a birthday. It's going to be one of those mornings, I can tell. Is celebrating a birthday on January 31st. And then Dustin Shepard Hoppus. Dustin is celebrating a birthday on Groundhog Day, another reason to celebrate that day. So happy birthday to all of you. Do you have a special day coming up this week? You can put that in the chat. I'm looking to see if anybody has put anything up there yet, but we want to celebrate with you. If you do have a special day coming up this week, that we can also say happy birthday, happy anniversary, happy bar mitzvah. Maybe it's your child's birthday. Maybe it's your spouse's birthday. Maybe it's just another special day that you celebrate in a big way, like Groundhog Day, but let us know. And if you have a special day coming up in February that you want to make sure we include when we're talking about our special days, you can email at coffeebreakswithsteve@comcast.net. We'll grab that information. We'll make sure that we include your special day in what we are doing. Oh, yeah, I'll tell you something. You know why it's good that I have guests on this show? It's because I can talk nonstop for 40 plus minutes. I just don't think it's necessarily a good idea. All right. I want to now move on to our topic, and I want to introduce our special guests today. And I want to tell you a little bit about their project, and I want to tell you about our topic today and a little bit about them, and then we're just going to bring them right in here. But Brandon and Whitney Cawood, after discovering that their child has a life-altering sensitivity to synthetic dyes, their dad, Brandon, who you're going to meet in a minute, is a first-time filmmaker, and along with his wife, Whitney, they're in the process of documenting their journey to unravel the impacts of synthetic dyes. They journey to meet with the world's leading synthetic dye experts as they conduct in-person interviews with scientists and psychiatrists, leading to an unexpected series of shocking stories and surprising discoveries. Now, Brandon and Whitney are married with 2 children, ages 4 and 2 years old. Brandon is a full-time commercial photographer and videographer, so moving toward documentary filmmaking was not outside the realm of reality for him, but still a first-time project. Whitney is an e-commerce business owner with a background in education and marketing. So Without any further ado, I would just like to introduce now and bring on board here Brandon and Whitney. Good morning or afternoon, whatever the case may be. You guys are located where?
In Georgia.
Georgia. So what time is it in Georgia right now?
12:40.
That's what I thought. So good afternoon to the two of you, and welcome to Coffee Breaks with Steve.
Hello.
Good afternoon.
Glad to be here.
Well,
this time worked out well for us because our kids are napping. So if they come out at any point.
That's okay. Then they joined the conversation too. We have
Okay.
that happen. That's not at all an issue. But I know I was telling our director before the show, I said, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see Brandon and Whitney get in here and try to get organized because they've got a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. That's always got to be a fun juggling act. So your backgrounds did not make it necessarily outside the realm of possibility that you would be doing some filmmaking at some point. And I don't know, we can talk about whether that was ever in and of itself a goal or a dream of yours, and we've talked a little bit about this, but Whitney and Brandon, I'd like you to just talk a little bit more about the plot of the film, what this documentary is really about, and what really prompted you to decide through your journey that making a documentary film was the way to go. Okay,
so as you said, and when you were talking about it, we discovered that our son has a neurological reaction to synthetic dyes, and by that we mean it's a behavioral reaction. So what's crazy is like throughout the filming of this documentary, like every family that we've interacted with, it's almost like a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde type thing. You know, our child is very sweet, very kind, but we would just go through these episodes of behavior that was uncontrollable and like impulses, no impulse control and stuff like that. And
sleeping problems.
And so after discovering like what was going on with us and working through it and figuring out that dyes were the issue, Whitney kind of got in some Facebook groups to kind of talk to other parents and find out tips and how people were living dye-free and shopping dye-free groceries and stuff like that. And that kind of led to her realizing that there's a lot of people that this is affecting. And if there's this many people that know that's affecting them, there's probably
millions,
way more than that don't know that this is something that could be affecting their child's behavior. So, so she approached me about us doing something like this. And like you said, it wasn't outside of the realm of possibility. I've done a short film, and I've done some other little film projects like that. But most of my work is, shorter. It's like short form, so commercials and things like that. But ever since we started, I started doing video work and knowing that was a thing, we've always talked about potentially one day doing a documentary or working on some sort of project. And so that's kind of where it led. And when we started it, we thought it would be, something small, and we had no idea who we would interview or how we would go about finding people to talk, but it's kind of evolved into this thing where we're interviewing the leading researchers in the world on this topic. And
literally our A team, like everyone that we wanted, starting with Emily, which is your good friend, all of our A team is literally our cast. Like it's been a God thing, like the whole way through. And obviously we were equipped to do it in terms of equipment, like literally equipped. And then our talents, it just, it lined up really well. So it's been crazy to see it come together. But like Brandon said, it was something that for about 1.5 years, we thought that it was just a really uncommon reaction. We didn't know anyone else that had ever had this type of a reaction to synthetic dyes, to the extent where 48 hours off of synthetic dyes, we met a child that we had only had glimpses of before. So we went off of dyes when he was 3. He was a new 3. So it was just crazy things that would normally be hard for him to emotionally cope with. He was just like, okay. And if you were to know him now, like he literally got an award a couple weeks ago for integrity in his pre-K. Like he's like the sweetest, kindest, most polite, most gentle child. So it's just the fact that something that we ate, and we, even before that, I tend to eat like cleaner. I thought that we were eating clean.
Yeah.
He had chronic ear infections, so he would always have Benadryl or Tylenol to cope with that, or an antibiotic until he had tubes. So during this season, it was every other day he was getting some kind of medication with red dye 40, and the reaction lasts up to 48 hours. So it was like he was constantly on a red dye 40 loop. But it was incredible. Just 48 hours later, just 48
There's
hours.
Somebody now.
Different child, yeah. Going potty.
All right. Yeah, I think about this, and it just raises so many questions. I think about our own kids during their upbringing and things that, for your son, there were some very significant issues that you were seeing. Other people, it may seem more subtle.
100%.
Right. And I would imagine that was one of the eye openers too, through this process in talking to different people and learning about it, and probably part of the reason for trying to get more information out there, because I think about my own kids when they were kids and grandkids now, and other people we know who have kids who they talk about whether it's an acting up type of issue, or we hear about conditions of ADHD, sleeping issues, sleeping through the night, even at an older age, and these various things. You were already discovering a lot before you started putting this film together. What were the biggest eye openers for you, have been the biggest eye openers for you in the process of making the film itself, that were revelations you didn't already know through your research?
Yeah, so buddy, gotta go to your room, okay? Go lay down and go to sleep. So I'm sorry.
That's not a problem.
His reaction is pretty uncommon, even among reactions. It is really intense. For a lot of children and even adults, it's they may have an underlying condition. Like our child does not. Literally dye solved all of our issues, which is incredible. But for a lot of people, they may have ADHD, and then they may have some trauma, and then for something to slightly alter their ability to cope emotionally just makes it so much worse. But I can say the most eye-opening aspect to me is one, from the researchers we spoke to, Dr. Joel Nigg. He has said that there's a range with kids with ADHD, which in the U.S., we have a significant amount of children with ADHD, that between 5 and 8% have a reaction to synthetic dyes, whether it's huge or small. Okay. It's still a neurologic reaction that's negatively impacting them. But also Dr. Stevenson in London, he's the researcher that is the reason why UK has a warning label.
No, the European Union.
The European Union, the EU, why they have a warning label that says may cause hyperactivity in some children.
Okay.
He said that he did studies on the general population. So he pulled from like children that didn't have ADHD, autism, or any kind of underlying condition. And he found that 1% of children are reactive to it, which is in the US.
Millions of kids.
Millions, like 3 million people?
Yeah, 1% would be like over 3 million.
Just the 1%.
Because you hear that percent, you go, okay, not a big deal. But you got to think about how that relates to the total population. What's that number, and how many families are impacted like that?
And all those numbers are all like very like that's like conservative numbers on that.
Well, yeah, because I would imagine, there's been information out, or there's been a lot of controversy, let's say, about things like red dye for a number of years. I can remember for years and years seeing things about the potential issues of various kinds, health issues connected to red dye 40. Is that what I'm thinking of? There are probably others, but I would think that it's still one of those things we're trying to really capture how many people, how many kids, but we're going to talk in a minute. I want to talk about adults as well. How many people are impacted by this? Because I would imagine capturing those numbers is still based on research that's fairly young and not necessarily all inclusive in terms of knowing how to capture that. Because I would guess that in spite of everything, a lot of the medical community doesn't really recognize this in full, and documentation regarding issues, neurological issues, physical, behavioral issues tied to synthetic dyes probably still hasn't been compiled fully.
Yeah. Well, the reality is researchers are really good at doing research, and then they publish that work. Physicians, they go through school. Largely, you don't, after your work, you don't go home and you look up new research. They just, I honestly don't think it's a matter of they don't believe it. I just don't think they've seen the research, because synthetic dyes have had how many human studies?
So we've done 2 interviews, one with Lisa, who used to work for Center for the Science and the Public Interest, and another one with Thomas. What's Thomas's last name?
Galligan.
He currently works for the
Center for Science and Public Interest.
And they were saying that of all the food additives, synthetic dyes have the most amount of studies with humans. So like
more than any other additive on the market, synthetic dyes have been studied with very, very damning evidence. Like, none of it is good. For instance, Red 3, the FDA, even on their website, you can go to the FDA's website, and they've done studies on their own where they have had lab mice. They've ingested Red 3.
And the mice who consumed the Red 3 had more instances of tumors than the mice who didn't. So they actually banned Red 3 in cosmetics in the 1990 or 1991, sometime around there.
1990.
But they're still in foods, like lots of foods that we eat.
I guess we shouldn't say the names.
Yeah.
It's bad. Like foods that you would, like children's foods, medications. It's very difficult to find antibiotics, medication for ADHD, seizure medicine. There isn't a single, at our Kroger, there isn't a single antibiotic that's liquid that doesn't have red dye 40 or red 3.
Yeah, we have to order it special to get it.
And for us, it's not like a matter of limiting. For many families, limiting is probably good. It's a dose-dependent thing. The more you eat, the more it affects you. But for us, literally just a small amount can significantly throw our child off for 48 hours. So we have to completely avoid it for his sanity and ours.
Yeah. It's on a comment down here. Emily said that Red 3 is still in medication. So yeah, that's definitely still in medication. I think one of the big ones, which is kind of this is a crazy occurrence. So Vyvanse, right?
I'm going to say names. Okay.
Well, Vyvanse is an ADHD medication.
I mean, you can look it up. Yeah.
So sure. This is public information. You can find this. You're not.
And Pediasure. That's the one that blew my mind.
Pediasure.
We have, our son was also premature, just slightly. He was a macro preemie, so he was just barely premature. But we still did a stint in the NICU, and weight was an issue with us.
Sure.
And so to think the most vulnerable population, your doctors say, here, give them this Pediasure was really surprising to me. But I think probably the most surprising thing to me was to find that that the FDA knew that Red 3 caused cancer since I'm 32, so that's before I was alive. They knew that Red 3 caused cancer, and they removed it from cosmetics, but not in our food. And I'm not somebody who believes that there are these horrible people sitting on a hill trying to kill us. It's not that. It's just a matter of people aren't talking about it. And they are probably worried about other things that people are talking about. And this is something that if you are concerned about synthetic dyes and the safety of synthetic dyes, we need to each of us use our platform to talk about that, whether you are on the school board, whether you're just a mom on a play day, or you're in politics, wherever you are on a podcast, like use your platform to talk about it and to educate people, because if politicians and the FDA don't believe that we care about it, then they're going to worry about the things that we care about. So
the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? I mean, it's that old adage that if you want something to change, you have to become a voice. You have to become an advocate. If necessary, you have to become a foot soldier.
Yeah. And we kind of feel like maybe that's what this film can be, is kind of that missing link. So like she said before, researchers are really good at doing research and doing these studies, but they're not really marketers. And then, so what causes change, especially in this day and time, is like public outcry for change and just the virality and like the way that documentaries work, and people can spend an hour and a half watching something and get all this information. That's kind of, we feel like this could be a missing link to help get some things. moving.
It's our goal to connect. Like research, although I'm college educated, reading research makes my mind feel like it's going to explode.
Yeah.
Like even the abstract it's confusing to me. So we're trying to connect these PhD researchers that live in this academia world to just like the regular general public in a way that is scientific but also easy to understand.
And as a documentary, it has some form of entertainment value. So, we want it to be high quality, want it to be fun to watch and interesting to watch, and so.
That's because that's typically, people learn in different ways, but if we can learn through being entertained at the same time, we tend to pay more attention, don't we?
Yeah.
Shalane asked the question here, and I wanted to hit this anyway, was, cleaning up your food, and you mentioned, Whitney, that you were already kind of living clean, but now that you have eliminated the dyes, have the two of you noticed any difference in yourselves as adults with the removal of the dyes, or do you think the bigger impact occurs for children?
So I'll answer first. So for me, I don't seem to have any reaction to dyes at all. Like if I eat something with dye, my moods don't seem to shift at all. Like my sleep doesn't seem to be affected. So like I said, this isn't something that affects everybody, and it's not necessarily the solution for every kid with behavior problems, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not the reason why kids have behavior issues, but the thing is it could be. Mm-hmm. There's a possibility that there could be a link there, and it's worth exploring. But for me personally, like I tend to avoid it as much as I can now, because I just learning of like the potential other bad things that aren't necessarily behavioral, but just like the health.
Well, and he has a family history with cancer too, so it's just avoiding any carcinogenic foods.
Yeah.
So for me, I don't really have a reaction, but Whitney, she's a little different. She's got I'm going to go, he left the water on in the bathroom. I'm going to go turn it off and she can answer.
That's fine.
Yeah. So, honestly, researchers don't know a whole lot about adults. There hasn't been any studies really on adults that I'm aware of. But for me, I can anecdotally say that when I take a antibiotic that's red, like I don't really want to make a big deal about me. I will make a big deal about my son. I'll stay in the office until I have a prescription that I know is dye-free, but I don't want to cause waves just for me. So the last few times that I had an antibiotic, I had terrible insomnia, like lay awake at night, the whole night, just like hovering above myself almost. So I do think that I am reactive. I also have ADHD. So I have a few different layers on me that makes me more vulnerable than I guess some people. But it is also a dose dependent thing. So the more you eat, the more it affects you. But also if you think about children, their size is much smaller. So a small amount of synthetic dyes can affect them more. So in general, adults seem to tolerate it a little bit better than kids. But yeah, I do think that I'm reactive. And some of the researchers that we've spoken to believe that there is like a connection, like some kind of family connection, that it's a genetic link.
Okay.
That's what they believe. There haven't been any studies that have proven that, but I definitely think there's something to that. I also have myself and my son have several food allergies. Like I'm literally allergic to wheat and dairy. They cause allergic reactions in me. So it's not surprising that I would react to an additive like synthetic dyes.
And we've kind of seen, not like I said, there's no like blueprint for this, but we have seen a lot of correlation with people who have not just reactions to food dye, but there are people that we talk to, like in her, she started a big Facebook group. And so there's a lot of people that will ask if their kids have any other like dietary like allergies or anything like that. It does seem to be common.
You see certain correlations and connections. And again,
we're also kind of seeing correlations with like neurodivergency. So like, obviously ADHD, there's it seems to be more prevalent
too.
And then like
anecdotally, we've
autism seems to have more prevalence with dyes. Then also like it's a running theory that we have that possibly even like gifted, like, gifted is on the neurodivergent spectrum as well.
Yeah.
So
we both have high IQs, and our son, not that we've had his IQ tested, but in going through the behavior issues we had him in behavior therapy. So we were working with a therapist to try to work through some of these behaviors. And once we eliminated dyes, they had concluded that he's a gifted, very smart child, but that he's just very sensitive to dyes. So there hasn't been any formal studies about giftedness, and there hasn't been a ton of studies about autism. Just in our group, Emily put the group name in the comments. So it's Dye-Free Families, and Dye-Free Family. And but anyway, we have over 20,000 parents. So we have lots of conversations, and autism is one that seems to come up a lot of children that are sensitive to it. ADHD, there's a lot of data on ADHD and synthetic dyes.
But one thing I also want to say is I think a lot of people tend to look at parents like us who talk about these sort of things and think that we're just super crunchy and cuckoo. But the truth is, like I said, dyes don't really affect me at all. And even our daughter, our 2-year-old, she doesn't seem to have any reaction. So it's not like we're just we're saying this stuff because, we've read that it's bad and we shouldn't eat it. We've experienced it. So we've seen it. It doesn't affect everybody. We've seen how much it actually does affect our son. And that's kind of what I'm pushing for.
Well, and I think that adds credence to what you're saying, because it's not like you're developing an anti-dye cult. Right. You're sharing things from the standpoint of your own experience, academic and scientific research, and providing an opportunity for people to say, what should I at least be exploring to determine the impacts that this may have on me or members of my family? And I think that's important. I want to shift gears just a little bit in the time we have left. And I'm going to mention that we're going to be here in a moment. I'm going to be putting in our chat here the links to your to Die For website. We're going to talk about this, the Indiegogo, as well in a minute, as well as your Facebook page. And so people have a starting point to kind of link to what you're doing and get more information. But I did want to ask you to put this documentary together. It's not like you're just sitting in your house in Georgia and everybody's coming to you. You've had to travel. You've had to travel in some cases fairly extensively in order to meet up with the people and put your film together. How has that affected daily life and business and family life to try to do that? How long have you been working on it, and what's the impact been?
So we started filming
Emily, when did we film with you?
So Emily was our second interview, but on our first trip. So I think Emily was our first person that we booked. Yeah. But she was the second person that we actually filmed. And we found Emily through another group, right? Mm-hmm. About NBC had done an article on her. And
if you haven't read Emily's NBC article, it'd be great if you link to that.
It's a good start. It's a good starting point.
So Emily, if you have that link and you want to put that in the chat, that would be great. Otherwise, we'll make sure. The other thing is we'll make sure that all of this information and these links are also on the Coffee Breaks with Steve Facebook page, so people can go there and get them after the show or find them if they're not tuned in today. But so talking about how long you've worked on this.
So October was when we first started filming. So we thought about it. We've been thinking about it for probably a year at this point. So we finally started booking people and then started filming in October. But the very first trip, obviously, it was an idea at that point. They were the only two people that we had booked so far. But we knew that if we could get enough footage to put together some sort of teaser and for fundraising video that we could kind of get some momentum. So luckily our first interview was with a lady named Dr. Rebecca Bevins. And she's got a really big TED Talk that has a lot of views on YouTube. I think,
and it changed Emily's life.
Yeah, it's crazy. A lot of these parents that we're interviewing, a lot of them have a connection to her TED Talk. So that's kind of where they got the initial information.
Interesting. Okay.
TED Talk. So connecting with her was a really good kickoff point, because she actually had a lot of the connections with the people that we have reached out to with the Center for Science and Public Interest. She gave us that connection, and that's just kind of developed from there. But so that first trip was in October. We flew out to, Utah and Nevada. So then we flew into Nevada, and then we drove to Utah, then we flew back home. And then after that, we put together our crowdfunding campaign.
We've raised about 11,000, close to 11,000. We had some people that gave to us just like in person and not on the platform. But that was enough to almost cover our travel costs.
Up to this point, it's covered. Other than that initial trip, we've probably invested about $5,000 of our own money to start going. Other than obviously, I've got equipment, but that equipment I've had, hasn't really been that big of. That wasn't an investment for this film. But then we've raised about $10,000, so that's covered a good chunk of our travel. We've got maybe one more trip's worth that we can do with that money. But that we've gone to Washington, D.C., Virginia. We just got back from Texas and Oklahoma. In February, we're going to London to interview Dr. Stevenson. Then we're going to we have a trip planned for California where we're going to be interviewing the senator out there who like proposed the bills in California, and then also there's a company out there that we're hoping to interview that's developing a natural dye that's pretty neat. I don't know a ton of information about it because we haven't actually interviewed them yet, so I don't want to misspeak on what it is. Yep. But it's a new way that they're doing dyes, and
it's pH balanced. So that's what's different. Like, so natural dyes now, you can't cook with them 1-to-1. They kind of lose their color.
Some of them do. So some of them they're not, that's kind of been a big argument from like big pharma and stuff and big food. Like, there's not a natural color for some of them that can stand up to cooking or be pH stable and stuff like that. So this company's trying to develop pH stable natural dyes, which is pretty cool. And then we've got another trip with Dr. Joel.
It's up north.
Joel Niggs.
Minnesota.
Nig.
Yeah.
He's one of our top of the line interviewees. So him and Dr. Stevenson are like the world experts in this whole thing. So we're excited about those interviews. So yeah, it's been a lot of travel.
A lot of work. I'm having to manually input about 250 emails a day.
There's a lot of things. We are literally a 2-person crew. So a lot of these, a
lot of sweat equity.
Even your low budget documentaries, a lot of times are going to have film crews with cameramen and AC.
You're at least going to have, in most documentaries, you're at least going to have a small crew of half a dozen to a dozen people involved in various capacities. So just we're going to get short on time here. I do want to ask you, when do you think you're at this point, what's your timeline for completion of the film? And I know that can be a moving target too, because you got finished filming and you got a lot of post-production that has to go into that, and you reach a point finally where you're going to lock it and it's going to be in the can. But then what are your hopes or your goals or your dreams for getting it out in front of the public?
So in a perfect world, we will be done by September. We'll at least have a version, a draft that's good enough to submit to Sundance. So like if Sundance is a pipe dream, obviously they get 14,000 submissions and only choose 150 or so. But obviously that's like the top of the food chain if you're going to go, festival and stuff like that. So if we do get into Sundance has to be the world premiere of the documentary. We can do some private premieres.
Sure.
So if we get into Sundance, then it wouldn't actually come out until January of 2024.
24, right.
If not, though, like we're still exploring. We got a distribution consultant that we're kind of talking with. Once we get a little further into post-production and stuff like that, we'll start working with him. And so our goal, I think, is just it's not really about selling. If we sell the film to somewhere, that'd be great. But that's not our main goal. Our goal is as many people to see it as possible. So
right.
So that's kind of. We're going to try to track whatever doors open to make that happen is kind of where we're at. Yeah. So if that's a streaming service, if that's we have to self distribute or work with a distributor, like we're still figuring that out. Right now, our eye is on getting the film finished, making sure we have all our legal ducks in a row, because this is, that those are things we never thought about before going into it. Every film needs a lawyer. You got to make sure that you do things the right way and follow the right work.
Which requires a lot more money than even we were anticipating. So we have almost enough to cover our travel, but we've applied for a grant, and if we don't get that grant, then we're going to have to pay for the rest of this out of pocket. So we definitely still could use funds. So if anybody's listening that's passionate about it,
so our Indiegogo,
give us your money.
We put the Indiegogo link is in the comments right now, and it will also be up on my pages following this show. So we'll have all of that information out there.
And you can go to Indiegogo. There are some perks if you want to do that.
Yeah.
If you're not super interested in perks and you just want to help out, we also have a PayPal link on our website that you can pay directly to. Obviously, Indiegogo was great. They helped us raise our funds, but they obviously take a percentage of what's donated.
Right.
So,
but it's also helpful. It's also helpful if people who are watching and listening to this want to look up your sites and then share that with other people, get the word out, or get the word out about even this show today so people can come back and watch what we've talked about. And we are running out of time today, so I need to end this, but I will say this, couple of things. Number one, thank you so much for what you're doing. I know that it's a labor of love, but I also know it's a labor. And so continuing that good work and making a difference, not only for your own family, but for many, many other families through this. So thank you. I will be following up with you on a couple of things. And one of those, just to put it out there right now, that I'd love to be keeping up with you along the way and maybe have you back when we get closer to the fall and maybe you're closer to getting this to production and distribution, and talk about that process and where people can hopefully by then have some idea of where we're getting ready to go to actually see the finished film. If they go to your Indiegogo page, I'll also mention this, there is a video on there. It's also available on YouTube that they can get a really good overview of the work that you've been doing. It's about a 5 or 6 minute long introduction to Die For, the documentary. So
probably the best spot is probably our website. So our website has the video too.
Yes.
We got all the links to Indiegogo and to Facebook page, and
website is also on here. We'll make sure that that's available to everybody. So Whitney and Brandon, thank you so much for being here today, for sharing your story. Thank you to everybody who's been tuning in. I'm going to let you get back to your Saturday and get back to your kids, and we'll be following up with you soon. But thank you, and God bless you both.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's great to meet you.
Bye, everybody.
All right, listen, I think that we need to be learning about things that, I know that even though I've heard about some of these synthetic dyes over the years, it's still real easy to get, we kind of tune a lot of things out. We hear so much information that sometimes we're not paying enough attention to the things that might be most important and most meaningful for us. So when I first heard about Whitney and Brandon and their work through Emily, and Emily, thanks for being on here today and being a part of the conversation. But it immediately sparked an interest in me to make sure that we gave them an opportunity to be here. So we'll make sure that this word continues to get out. I want to let you know what's coming up the next couple of weeks before we let you go and get on with your weekend as well. Next week, I mentioned we were talking about birthdays, and we were talking about Carol Siegel. I said that Jonathan was going to be back. Well, Jonathan is going to be back next week. And Jonathan is a musician. He is a piano player, a singer, a songwriter, and he's also a music educator. He gives lessons. He's taught music, but he recently finished writing a musical, his own musical, called Space Vacation, the musical. And I've had a chance to listen to it. He's posted the music for that on his website and some other places. It's fascinating. And so he's going to be back to talk about his musical next week, how that came about, and where we can hopefully find a place to not only hear the music, but see it performed on stage at some point in the near future. And then in 2 weeks, dear friend and colleague of mine, Dee Kiso, is going to be with us. She is a person, she's one of these people that I just look at and I am constantly wowed when I see what Dee is doing and have conversations with her. Extremely creative, extraordinarily creative in taking her knowledge and her expertise and getting it in front of people. And we're going to be less talking about her expertise in the areas of nonprofit work and fundraising, and talking a little more detail about when you've got knowledge. We all carry knowledge. We're all experts in some way. How do we take that expertise and that knowledge and get it in front of people in a way that, number one, doesn't make people tune us out and roll their eyes because they say, well, you're acting like a know-it-all. Sometimes there's a way to go about doing that so we don't come across as being better than others. But there's also times when we're putting things together from our knowledge base that's part of our business, part of getting people lined up to be able to hire us to do work for them. How do you share knowledge without giving away the store? And so Dee Dee's going to be here to talk about that. And it's really, Dee Dee's a fantastic communicator. I think that you're going to enjoy her on here. Are there topics that you would like to see us cover? We uncover things all the time. We encounter people, we encounter topics, but you have great ideas. You are part of this conversation. This is your coffee table as well. So I encourage you to, again, write to cbwsteve@comcast.net to share your ideas, share your thoughts about topics or people you would like to see on the show. It's always helpful if you know somebody you can make an introduction to as a guest, but just your ideas are very helpful and appreciated. So I invite you to do that. And as we get ready to get on, all of us, with our weekends and get on with our week, this has been a reminder today that we can all be advocates. We are all advocates for something because we have things we believe in. We have topics, we have causes, we have people we believe in. And sometimes it's on a big scale, and sometimes it's simply the people who are around us, and it's the situations that are around us. So as I remind you every week, please find a way to make a difference in your world this week. God bless you. Have a great week.